Good morning, everyone. We're about to start Spill the Tea. I am Dr. Pete, and T will be joining us. Tanner will be joining us on Clubhouse. We are live on Facebook. We are live on YouTube, and we will be live in Clubhouse. And T is going to be mainly moderating the Clubhouse, and I'm going to be moderating the YouTube and the Facebook. And today's subject piggybacks off of last week, um, which is the consequences of the sugar in our diet. And we are often asked, I am often asked, what's the first thing that you can do to improve your metabolics? So if you're diabetic, significantly overweight, or you're suffering from cardiovascular disease, how can you improve those situations? Because all those things are metabolic. Uh, you can cut the sugar out of your diet, and so we are going to reiterate and talk again about literally the amount of sugar that is in our culture and also in the world culture. Right, diabetes is something that is really a big deal worldwide. There are certain countries where it's a bigger factor than others. Um, okay, just be patient here because we have to get lined up in several different places. Morning, Tanner.
Morning, Dad. How are you?
Good. Okay,
Good.
let's. Okay, you've already can you set me up as a moderator?
Yes. There we go. Okay. I haven't done that before.
Okay. So let me go ahead, T, and reintroduce what we're doing. I see we just have one person right now in the Clubhouse event. Okay, so we're live right now on YouTube, Facebook, and in Clubhouse. I am Dr. Pete, and of the Dr. Pete and T team, and T is for Tanner, and she is live in Clubhouse right now. We're in both platforms. Today's topic, again, it piggybacks off of what we spoke about last week, and this is the burden of sugar in our culture and the effect that it's having. We the show this week is not the same as the show that we did last week, but we need to review some of the things just in case there are new people here, so that they can understand the train of our thought this morning and also, the direction of the discussion. So it's important for people to realize that in the US, we consume about 70 pounds, an average poundage of 70 pounds of sugar per year per person. This number is not something that I just literally pulled out of the sky. All right. I went to 7 different sources to try and find out how much sugar the average person is eating. And those sources included the New Hampshire Department of Health and Human Services, Statistica, the Diabetes Council, the American Heart Association, the Angeles Institute, the Sugar Science Organization, the Diabetes Council, and then finally the CDC. Each one of those organizations has a number that they have published and that they have put out there, and I simply took all 7 numbers and generated an average. And you need to understand that there was a wide variety of values, starting at 27 pounds and extending to 150 pounds of sugar consumed annually by people in the U.S. Why such an incredible diversity of numbers? Because it depends in part who the institute is and who is funding them. And then from that point of view, how they're calculating the amount of sugar, because it makes a difference, right? In one case, in the extreme, they're talking about the amount of sugar that you have that is added to a particular type of consumable product. Like you sit down and you drink a 12-ounce can of soda, right? That's pretty straightforward because you have this, 12-ounce can of liquid and a certain amount of sweetener has been added to that. Then when you eat it, you're getting an input into your body of that much sugar. The calculation then extends to other organizations, like in particular, I think the New Hampshire Department of Health and Human Services looked more globally. When I say globally, I don't mean the whole planet. I mean they looked more globally at what people eat on a daily basis. How many average sodas are being consumed, how much packaged processed food is somebody eating, right? Because these are all places where sugar is coming in to the diet. Now, let me briefly reset what we're talking about. Again, understand, especially in Clubhouse, that we are now not only live in Clubhouse, but we are also live on YouTube and in Facebook. And as such, since I am broadcasting from StreamYard, the session is being recorded, just so everyone understands that. T and I are broadcasting from our club, Keto Makes Me Healthy. And so if you like the content that we're going to be talking about this morning and what we did last week, then, please click the little green house at the top and join our club. But I also want to make a call out to the other clubs where we usually appear and that I think are also important to you if you're interested in this issue. And those would be Keto for the Soul, the Keto Diet, Keto University, and because Clubhouse has grown so fast, you're also going to see that there are other keto clubs. And I would encourage everyone who's with us this morning to get around and get in those rooms. I think on Clubhouse in particular, there's a lot of keto support here, right? You can find support groups, and part of what we're going to be talking about this morning, in fact, a big part of it, in giving up sugar is having the support to do this. T, before I go on, because I have a tendency to do that right now, is there anything you want to jump in and say?
Nope, I guess just to make sure we reset the room. And I know you just did that perfectly, but this is Keto Makes Me Healthy. Stop the Sugar. This is also a weekly Clubhouse Facebook and YouTube event that we're doing every single Monday at 7 a.m. Please go give us a follow on Clubhouse. Where again, this isn't the same conversation we have every time, but this is a huge controversial topic that we talk about, which is stop the sugar. And then in the next couple months as well, we will be doing we have kind of a challenge up our sleeve too that we're going to bring aware to everybody and hope that you guys will join us. So we're excited for that as well. With that, this is T. I don't have anything else to say. Go for it, Dad.
So I want everyone who's listening this morning in all the different places that we are at this moment to understand why T and I do this, right? 3 years ago, I was pre-diabetic, and I had no idea, what I was going to do about that situation. And I got, I was very fearful at the time because when I went into the medical literature, and it may seem like to some of you who are already, well educated in the keto lifestyle, that this couldn't have been that difficult to do. But the truth is, when you know nothing, when you know absolutely nothing about a particular metabolic condition, right? You've gotten this email or you get a phone call from your doctor and they're like, you're diabetic or you're pre-diabetic or you have serious medical complications that come with the obesity, or, you've got cardiovascular disease and you've passed out and they're about to put a stent in one of your arteries, right? A situation like that. And it's explained to you that this is a metabolic condition, and that you do in the internet age what any most individuals I think would do, and you go on there and you start searching in Google, right? And the first thing that I learned at the pinnacle of the medical literature is that there's no reversibility for these conditions, right? When you look at their own data based on how they treat those diseases. And I'm using the word treat here very specifically because our medical establishment is focused on endpoint medicine, right? So you have a certain condition, and what they want to do is reduce the symptoms of that condition, right? So in the case of somebody with diabetes, if the diabetes has already progressed far enough, what are they going to do? They're going to want to inject you with insulin. So you're going to start having to do that, right? If you don't know anything else, that's what you're going to start to do. So I looked at the literature, their literature, and I saw, all right, there's no reversibility to any of these conditions, right? 98% of the people that are diagnosed in either of these three main categories, the obesity thing, the diabetes, or the cardiovascular disease, are all going to progress further into that disease platform, and you are going to get sicker. That is the main thing here. And in the case of the diabetes, we're talking about some really serious crap here. We're talking about chronic kidney disease. We're talking about getting amputations because of the problems with the peripheral nervous systems. We're talking about heart attacks and stents, and all this stuff, right? And I looked at that, and honestly, it scared the hell out of me because, I was a career rock climber. I was a 5th-year CrossFit athlete, a cave diver, right? I was doing all of these things. I've been active all my life. And now all of a sudden someone's telling me, well, okay, you're pre-diabetic, get some more exercise and eat a healthy diet. What on earth does that even mean? And why are you telling a 5th-year CrossFit athlete that I just need to get some more exercise? And then you're looking at this literature, which is very grim. It's totally grim. And I'm thinking, I have a daughter who's actually moderating our room and clubhouse right now. And, she's just gone out into the world. Eventually she's going to get married and have kids and things like that. And I'm thinking, where am I going to be in that? Where am I going to fit into that? And then I got an amazing wife, right? And we're trying to live our life like maybe some of you in our room right now, in the clubhouse room, some of you listening to us on YouTube. I'm 63 years old. I just turned 63 a couple of weeks ago. And people are talking about, I'm retired. This is what I do now. This is what I do now, right? And I would like to keep doing this. But when you have a progressive metabolic disease, it's only a matter of time before you have to start giving up, real parts of your life. And I had this image of my grandkids someday coming to me in a nursing home where I've got, 1 foot cut off and I'm on oxygen, and I'm thinking, no, I don't want to do that. And, this scared the hell out of me. Now, it took time for me to keep looking because I'm a PhD biochemist, and I understood the fact that diabetes is a metabolic disease. And it made absolutely no sense to me, no sense at all, that this thing had, or that the only option was managed treatment. What I was being told by the doctors, managed treatment. This doesn't make any sense because a metabolic disease, whether we're talking obesity, diabetes, or cardiovascular disease, is just that. It's metabolic. And that means that it is dependent on what you put in your mouth. I understood this basic fact. And it took me quite a few months before I stumbled onto the TED Talk by Dr. Sarah Hallberg. And then the light went on in my head. And I'm like, oh my God, how could I, a PhD biochemist, have missed this simple fact that lowering the carbs was what needed to happen, right? And so I got the 1 year publication from Virta Health at that point, and they didn't have the 2 year publication out yet. I put that sucker down on the desk, and I looked to see exactly what things that they were monitoring in these individuals that they were claiming to have reversed diabetes in. And I made a list of those things. I reduced the carbs, and I started monitoring my blood glucose, my ketones, my blood pressure, my weight. And I know that as I talk about this, I know there are people in the clubhouse room right now that are going, I don't want to get on the scale, but, you know, and I don't know in today's subject matter that we're going to be going over, whether we're going to come back to the metrics or not, but I rigorously, and in the people that I work with now, we rigorously measure biometrics. Why do we do that? Because by God, you can reverse these conditions with a ketogenic lifestyle. How do you know you're reversing them? How do you know even to trust me, right? And that's a good question, you know, and, you know, I'm just this, like right now on the screen, I'm like this figure up here talking, but how did I know that I reversed this condition? Because I measured the biometrics and I saw my own fasting glucose stabilize. And in 52 days, I was able to reduce, I stabilized my fasting glucose into the mid 70s to mid 80s from being over 100 on a daily basis. And I dropped my A1C from 5.9 to 5.0 in 52 days. Now, I want everyone to understand that the medical establishment views the whole diabetic thing in what we say is a glucose-centric way of thinking. And that's what I just said to you. I said, okay, well, based on my fasting glucose and my A1C, I reversed that condition. But you need to understand that the diabetic platform, which is also underlying the obesity and the cardiovascular disease, is a lot more complicated than just fasting glucose and the A1C, right? We're talking about dyslipidemia. And when I say that word, I'm talking about the relationship, for example, between HDL and triglycerides. Because, you know, if you're my age and you've gotten to the point where the numbers have finally popped and they're going, dude, you're diabetic, or dude, you have serious health complications with the weight issue, or you have cardiovascular disease and we need to put a stent in one of your carotid arteries, which I have had. Our very first client had 3 stents in their carotid arteries. All right. Then you got a problem, because this is multi-organs. It's not just about the fasting glucose anymore and what your A1C is. It's like, you know, you've got problems in your pancreas, you got problems in your liver, in your kidneys, the whole 9 yards. And that stuff, that takes a while to reverse. And in my case, the dyslipidemia was at least a year. And again, I'm really hardcore in my biometrics. So I was going in and having my bloods every 3 months, and I'm actually about to go back in and have another 3 month in the next 2 days, depending on which day I choose that I want to, you know, get the fasting and everything lined out. So I want to reset this, and then I can see if we have any questions, and we can start going from there. So what we're celebrating today, and I'm going to say celebration because Tanner and I have been asked over and over again, we get asked this question: what is the initial thing we can do to improve our metabolics? Stop the sugar, right? I started this broadcast talking about the fact that the average person in the US is eating 70 pounds. That came from 7 different organizations where I got that number. When we talk about the names of sugar, we need to do that, because this stuff is everywhere. It's absolutely everywhere, right? And a lot of people that want to stop eating it don't realize that something that they're eating actually has sugar in it. So some of the names, the cane sugar, beet sugar, honey, molasses, fruit juice concentrates. Oh my God, you basically cannot take a fruit juice down off the shelf in a supermarket and walk out of there and eat that stuff without eating a ton of sugar. Glucose, sucrose, fructose, high fructose corn syrups, maple syrup, brown rice syrup, barley malt syrup, agave, right? And they like to put natural agave in front of the agave, right? Or organic, natural agave. All right. Dextrose, dextrin, corn syrup, cornstarch, right? These are all names. Now, over the weekend, I was at a school reunion, right? And it was for a graduating class that made the average age under the tent my age, 60, in the 60s, all right? And some of the foods that should be avoided, I'm going to circle back and you'll see why I just raised the issue about the school reunion in a second. So foods to avoid, right? Where do we find high sugar processed foods? Sodas, energy drinks, sports drinks, cakes, ice cream, candy, loaded coffees, right? Going into the coffee place and then getting the max loaded latte, bagels, pizza, pasta, bread. The very first meal that I went to at the reunion, I looked at the itinerary that they provided everybody and I saw what they were serving. And I just had this sense in my gut that there was going to be nothing there for me to eat. Nothing there for me to eat. I just had this sense of it. Now, I've been doing this lifestyle for a while, and I feel pretty confident walking into restaurants that I can find things to eat there. I just have to be creative when I use the menu. But I had a strong sense about this reunion thing because on the itinerary, they said that it was going to be pizza and salad. And I knew, well, number one, I'm not eating the pizza, right? There is no way I'm going to do that, especially for someone who was previously pre-diabetic. I am still to this day eating total carbs per day at 50 grams or less, right? And I've done the experimentation on the N1 stuff on myself, and I know that my glucose intolerance is a pretty small window. If I get outside that range at all, I can just, over a course of days, I can watch my fasting glucose start to rise again. It's like clockwork, right? So I get there, and there's two things I want to point out. Firstly, under the tent, I looked around, and we know now that there's a strong correlation between the waist circumference ratio of waist circumference to your height and all of the things that I talked about, irregular fasting glucoses, high A1Cs, dyslipidemia. Down the road we go in the diabetic platform. I looked around that tent, and there was only a handful of people underneath that tent who were my age, who were metabolically healthy. One of them was sitting at the table with me, and I just calculated ratios for her in her bloods. And she has one of the most healthy profiles I've ever seen in any of the people that I've worked with. She was one of those people that was metabolically healthy. Everyone else underneath that tent. And I even saw one guy that had electrodes hanging out from underneath his shorts. I don't really know what that was about. But I mean, this is pretty serious in our age group, right? In terms of the health, lack of health. Remember, 52% of us in our 60s are pre-diabetic or diabetic. 72% are overweight or obese, and 50% or slightly greater than that are afflicted with cardiovascular disease. So my quick search around under the tent was consistent with those numbers for sure. Then I went up to look at what was on the table, right? And none of the pizza was accessible. I wouldn't touch that with a 10-yard pole, right? Then I went to the salads because that's the next obvious place to go. And if I didn't say it already, I want you to know I ate before I went to this thing. All right. I ate my own food before I went to this thing. And I saw the salads, every single one of the salads. There was pasta salads. That's a no, right? Absolute no. Then I went to the dark green lettuce salads, and I saw that they were liberally coated with some kind of dressing. And, I very carefully took one bite, a very small bite of salad, and I could taste the sugar in it. So I walked, right, done with it, back to the table. And one last thing to say is like, oh, okay, what about the alcoholic drinks? Because, probably some people in our room, some people that are listening to this on YouTube don't drink at all. But I still like to have a drink or two, you know, especially when I'm at a social thing like this, where, you know, we're in this gathering, family, people, you know, and I wanted to have a drink. I'm not talking about going there and like cranking down the alcohol. So I went to the drink table too. What did they have there? The thick craft beers. No, right? And then they had the wine, and that was it. There was not even any hard liquor for me to sneak in like a gin on the rocks or something like that that is clean enough for someone on the ketogenic diet to have if they want. So to finish then, this is like a mini seminar, and then we can open up the Clubhouse room and on YouTube. I'm live right now, live on Facebook. If you have questions, just go ahead and type them in. We'll address them here. We'll also simultaneously address the Clubhouse room. So to finish, and then I'm going to quiet down and see if we have any questions. How do we eliminate the sugar? Number one, cook whole food, right? Cook whole food. That's a number one, right? If it looks like food, like, you know, here's some dark green lettuce, you eat that, right? Here's a nice cut of meat that has fat in it, eat that. So it's whole food, avoiding the aisles in the supermarket. And the sugar thing at the easiest level is not that hard to avoid, as long as you get the hang of where it's appearing. So again, in the bagels, the pizza, the pasta, the bread, the break rooms are dangerous in a workplace, right? Usually everything on the table there is not something that you're going to want to eat. And then, you know, when you're dealing with a packaged food, you've got to turn it around and look at the nutrition label, number one, and then at the ingredient list. And remember, I gave you guys at the start of this the list of all of the different names of sugar. So you have to be very careful. You may not even realize this, but in some cases, they put sugar, dextrose, in salt. You even find it in your salt. All right. And with that, I'm Dr. Pete, and I'm going to stop talking now. T, why don't you take over?
Yeah, so and I'm just going to kind of follow up with first of all, I want to reset the room. So this is Keto Makes Me Healthy, Stop the Sugar. We're kind of piggybacking off of like what we talked about last week. And I just want to say too that I was also at the school reunion with my dad and my mom, and you know, the issue that I had was that I had driven up on Saturday, and just to point out, like we live in Phoenix, Arizona, and we're going to Sedona, and I brought my 2 dogs with me, so I was leaving on Saturday, and when I got there, I hadn't eaten breakfast because I have a tendency to fast in the morning. I have like 3 cups of coffee with heavy cream over like a 2-hour period, and I don't really eat any breakfast or anything of the sort, just because I'm not really hungry. And by the time I got there to this like reunion, we went directly from basically dropped off my dogs in my grandparents' house, and I went straight over to the school, thinking that like, and this was ignorant of me, right? This was very ignorant of me. And I want to point this out because this is a situation that happens for a majority of people. Like this is, like my dad said he ate before. I did not eat before. So I went to this school reunion thinking like, okay, there's going to at least be something keto that I can eat here, right? There was like a piece of, I don't know if you remember what it was. It was like a piece of chicken or something. It was the only thing I could eat there. Literally like a piece of chicken. And I ate the piece of chicken, you know, because I was dying like of starvation at this point. I was like, okay, it's like 2:00. I haven't eaten all day. I'm really hungry. But, you know, and I went to go grab a salad too, because it looked really good. But of course, when I took a bite out of it, it was so sweet, and like and the dressing was added to the salad beforehand. And you know what went through my mind? Because I was like, who adds, and I don't know if this is anybody else, but like I grew up in a family where we didn't just dress the salad for people. We gave them the option of dressing the salad. So I was like, we come to this big event, right? And I have already dressed salad. And I was so upset because I normally, if I go to places, I can eat, you know, salad and a piece of chicken and be totally fine. But I get there, I can't even eat the dang salad because it's covered in sugar. And I was starving. So we ate lunch I ate lunch pretty quick, and I looked at my dad and I was like, I need to go back to the house. and we actually went and we made kind of our own keto meal because I severely needed to eat. So I just kind of wanted to piggyback off what my dad said just now, is like, you have to prepare yourself. I did not. This was a perfect example of what I did to put myself in a situation where I could have thrown myself out of ketosis super quickly, because I was starving. I was super hungry, and I didn't eat because I was going around my normal day. I was fasting. I did all of that, but I normally have food at my fingertips that I can eat for myself, and I didn't even pack any of that. And sometimes that happens. And so, as just a reminder, like, it's super important to make sure you're planning and preparing for things such as that, because I didn't at all. And luckily, there was a piece of chicken that I could eat that wasn't going to throw me straight out of, ketosis. But when I did get back, I did eat food. And this is a really big controversial thing that we talk about and I just kind of also want to talk about this too, and later that night we went back and me and Dad ate beforehand, mind you, but we went back and it was Mexican food. And we get this a lot, is what can you eat with Mexican food that's low carb or no carb? And there's a lot of stuff you can eat. It's just that you have to be kind of picky about it. When you go to an event, such as a catering event, it's almost like impossible to find, something that is low carb, because you're not going to the restaurant picking out the menu. Hey, can I have this, this, and this? You're basically given this plate of stuff in front of you, right? And so we went back later that evening. Thank God we ate. And the Mexican restaurant actually had, my aunt looked it up online, and it was like, oh, look, it's like no carb. But when people say no carb, it gets me super uncomfortable, because I can't rely on that to go to some place and know that it's going to be absolutely low carb or no carb. And I'm really grateful if we didn't do that, because out of that whole entire mesh, there was literally like one dish that we could actually eat that was a low carb dish. And I wouldn't even say it was a dish. It was like a piece of meat that we could eat that was low carb. And so this brings up the most, and this is the issue with the sugar aspect. It's just kind of gateways into what is the biggest problem that we encounter as low carb lifestylers or keto lifestylers. I prefer low carb, the terminology low carb, but low carb lifestylers is when we go to a situation like that, where we go to a reunion or events such as that, those type of things are not directed towards individuals who are low carb. I mean, there was a ice cream station, there was rice and beans, I actually looked at my dad, because we were in line together, and I said, look at the first 4 things of those containers. It was 2 different containers of rice and 2 different containers of beans. Now, like, that is, to me, it makes it super, super difficult, I think, as a keto or low carb individual to go to events such as those and not have anything to eat. And so I guess I was going off in a rant, but just because you brought it up, Dad, that, we did eat before that, thank God, but had we not, then we were going to be in a situation again, like I was that afternoon for lunch, where I was like, oh crap, I cannot eat anything here. So just as advice, look at the back of the labels and prepare yourself for situations like that. And that was a prime example of me not coming prepared and me being put in a situation that I was, really, really hungry. I wasn't like, and I put myself in that situation. So this is T, and I'm done talking now.
We'd like to invite anyone who's in the room to put up your hand if you've got a comment or something you'd like to add. I know our clubhouse room this morning is pretty small. It doesn't make any difference. Don't be shy. We'd love to have you up here. If you have any questions, I'll give everyone a second, and then I'm prepared to talk about the next issue here.
And please come up to the room, or come up to on stage, or whatever. Bring comments, questions, or your own stories about situations like that, because we can help guide you through that. And I'm really grateful, for example, that I had my dad in that situation, because we're both on the low carb lifestyle, so he was already preparing for situations such as that.
Okay, so the next part of this, and T and I have both actually edged already towards this issue. it's one thing to understand intellectually what you need to do, right? In my extended family, in a lot of the people that I've had, conversations with, like over this weekend, um, especially my wife is very supportive, right? So she was letting certain people that she talked to at the reunion know that Tanner and I are doing health coaching and we're helping people reverse diabetes, right? So I would find myself in these conversations through my wife in regard to, how do you do this? And it's one thing to intellectually understand giving up sugar, right? And giving up the refined carbohydrates. It's quite another to actually do it in practice because of the issue of food cravings. So what I have found working with the people that I work with over time is that uh, most of us exist on some kind of a continuum between simple food cravings. I went through this, right? I had food cravings when I started into this lifestyle, in particular for dark chocolate that was loaded with sugar. All right, and but this continuum extends from food cravings into eating disorder, and my experience is that everyone falls on that line somewhere. Some of us are down on the more simple cravings part of it. Some of us are edging towards the eating disorder part of it, and I even have someone I work with who binges on refined carbohydrate items. All right, so it's understanding intellectually what one needs to do and then putting it into practice can be really problematic. And I'm thinking of one person in particular this weekend who's an extended family member who I know understands this stuff, right? Understands from an intellectual level that they've got to give up the carbohydrates, not just even in this case, not even just the refined sugars, but they need to do what I'm doing. They need to be eating not more than 50 grams of total carbs per day. But then when you watch the behavior, and again, I'm going to take you out into the whole tent, when they opened up the dessert line after, everyone had tons of pizza and these sugary salads and whatnot, and then watching the pile of these desserts coming back, the cake, and then massive amounts of ice cream on top of the cake, and then that dripping in chocolate sauce, right? The ability to give that kind of stuff up is really problematic, so understanding where you fall on that continuum is really, really important. And so, it's one thing to say, okay, I'm going to give up the sugars, right? I think saying that is pretty easy. But I think if there's anyone in our clubhouse room or anyone listening to this broadcast right now on YouTube, if you're sitting on the other side of this line right now, that you're afflicted with metabolic dysfunction and you want to shift into the keto lifestyle to reverse that condition, you have to plan ahead for this. And it's a matter of understanding in yourself where you fall on that continuum. How much sugar actually am I eating every single day? Because this is so endemic in our culture. I think a lot of people don't even realize how much sugar they're eating over the course of the day. At the end of the day, how many sodas have they had, right? How many cookies did they eat in the break room? How many bagels did they consume before even the lunch hour, right? These are all issues because when you make the shift to the lifestyle, those eating patterns, they still exist at that point, right? And the pressure is going to be there from within yourself to continue that pattern. And it can, for some people, be exceedingly challenging to do that. All right, this is Dr. Pete, and I'm done talking now. I'd like to see if we have any questions or anyone who wants to join us on stage and make any comments.
And I guess just as like I'm going to kind of piggyback off of what my dad just said, is that I am an individual. I don't have, like, I didn't go to the doctor and was diagnosed as pre-diabetic or type 2 diabetic. I do the keto lifestyle, the low carb lifestyle, and I've been doing it now for 2.5 years for preventative measures. Why? Because if you look at my dad, he was diagnosed as pre-diabetic, and I don't want to be, and he doesn't want me to be, like down the road and all of a sudden I'm considered a pre-diabetic or a type 2 diabetic. And so I do this stuff for preventative measures. And I have the choice when I go to events like that, like for my dad, like I just said, he does it because, he is seriously, he was considered pre-diabetic. Like, so he does not like get out of ketosis at all. Right. And when I go to events like that, I have the option to be like, if I want to have a piece of, a cookie or an ice cream or something along the lines of that, I can do that. I mean, realistically, like, it is my choice to be able to do that if I want to do that, because I don't have any health, like pre-diabetics or type 2 diabetics or severe cardiovascular stuff. But I don't do it. And the reason being, especially when it comes to ice cream or cookies or something along the lines of that, because I will tell you that the low carb lifestyle has helped me exponentially, with my, I had hormonal stuff going on that my doctors couldn't figure out what was going on. I had migraines. The low carb lifestyle has taken care of that. By just me doing the low carb lifestyle. So if I go and I'm like, hey, I'm going to have a cookie, I will wake up the next morning and I feel hungover. I feel like I just went out with all my friends, like clubbing. That's how I feel if I have, sugar and everything like that. And what was shocking to me is that I have the choice to do that if I'm really craving it, and I don't. And my body feels so much better. And we talk about intuitive eating all the time. It's listening to your body. What does your body want? What does your body need? And my body does not want sugar at all anymore. My body cannot withstand sugar. To me, it's like a poison now, is actually what it is. It affects me the same way that overindulging in alcohol affects me. That's literally how my body has adjusted over the past 2.5 years to sugar. And if you think about that, that's really scary. If you think about, you go out, and I know probably everyone here has gone out and hung out with their friends, unless, you haven't had an ounce of alcohol, and probably overindulged and woke up the next morning feeling like, dang, I have a pounding headache. My body feels a little bit sluggish. It feels awful. That's how I feel if I have cookies and ice cream and anything like that. And so to think about it, it affects me the same way that alcohol does. So with that, I'm going to stop talking, but please feel free to come up to the stage, ask any questions or bring any comments. Again, just to reset the room, this is Keto Makes Me Healthy. This is our room, our club that we started. This is our protocol that we started in order to follow the low carb lifestyle to actually really change your life and take control of your life, because it's helped me do that. It's helped my dad do that. So again, give us a follow on Instagram as well as on here. And this is T, and I'm done talking now.
So T raised a point about the toxicity of the sugar. So I want to go back to the statistics, because it's quite possible that there are people listening to us right now that think, well, you're overstating this, right? How can sugar be toxic? When I eat it, I don't, my stomach doesn't cramp. I don't fall over dead. So how can you be talking about this? So let's just remind ourselves what the statistics tell us. And what that is that of the people that are my age, I'm 63, that 52% of us are pre-diabetic or diabetic. All right. So what does that mean in reality? And the reality is that about half of our population is glucose intolerant. What does that mean? It means that for half of us, right, and these conditions take decades to happen, because the damage that's being done to things like our organs, like our pancreas, the liver, the kidneys, they take a long time to progress to the point where you actually see the numbers change, right? So half of us have glucose intolerance, And when you put any two of us in a room together, our glucose intolerance is not the same, right? The amount of carbs I can have before I start seeing, and the main marker here that I'm going to talk about now is going to be the fasting glucose, which I track rigorously every single day. Where's my notebook? All right. This morning, my fasting glucose was 91. My ketones are 1.0. My blood pressure was 106/73. And my weight is 134, down from 168 pounds when I started this lifestyle. And I'm now weight stable between 134 and 135, right? And as I think some of the, I recognize some of the people in the clubhouse room, and you realize that the weight loss doesn't happen all at once, right? So when I lost my weight starting at 168, I hit 3 different plateaus. And over the last 3 years, I've finally settled in at 135. And I think that that's probably where I'm going to stay in this lifestyle, right? And keep in mind, I was not trying to lose weight. What I was trying to do was reverse my diabetes, which I did. All right. So I want to come back to this concept of glucose intolerance, because for over half the US population, they're glucose intolerant. How much? Depends on the individual, and trying to sort that out is not easy. And I tell a lot of people that I work with, trying to figure out what's going on metabolically on a more precise level is like a needle in a haystack. It's a highly complex thing. I mean, our human bodies are highly complex, and the effects of sugar on our body are global, right? We're talking about, first off, you've got 2 dominant sugar molecules. You have glucose and you have fructose. And what the 2 of them do in some ways are overlapped, and in other ways are completely independent. And in fact, I would argue that fructose is a far more dangerous molecule than the glucose. But then maybe I'm just like, juggling some balls in the air with that one, right? So how are these effects? What is happening in the body? All right. So one of the first things when you eat high sugar diets is the glycation, right? And what does that term mean? It means that as the sugar rises in your blood, that the glucose and the fructoses can be attached to proteins. Wherever those sugar molecules encounter protein, parts of proteins and so on, the sugar can be literally bonded to the proteins. And in the process of that bonding, reactive oxygen species, free radicals are released in that chemical reaction. And free radicals are little, chemical molecules that are they're highly reactive. And basically anything that they bump into, they're going to react with it. And when they react with stuff like that, they cause damage. So it takes time, over decades for that damage to build up to the point where someone like me goes to the doctor and they send you this nice little email, a day later, well, you're pre-diabetic, and then you go home and you have the hell scared out of yourself, The next thing is the generation of reactive oxygen species in a general way. Every time those sugars are metabolized, and glucose is metabolized different than fructose. Glucose can go into the vast majority of organs in our body where it's going to be processed. Fructose is unusual because it's only processed by the liver. And in the liver, the breakdown of the fructose is going to generate uric acid. Yes, people, you're talking to a gout sufferer. Before I went on to keto, and I was a gout sufferer because my uric acid was high. And why was it high? Most likely because my consumption of fructose was too high. And then the other thing is the fructose causes the formation of fat on your liver. So maybe some of you have heard about non-alcoholic fatty liver disease right from the fructose. All right. And then we have the insulin resistance issue, because in fat tissue, adipocytes, and in the liver, you need insulin in order to get the glucose into those cells. And so this concept of insulin resistance, what does that mean? It means needing much higher concentrations of insulin to drive that glucose that's now elevated in your bloodstream into the adipocytes and into the liver. All right. And you actually have changes in gene regulation because of the high concentration of these individual sugars in the bloodstream, and the effects that they have on their target organs, the fructose going into the liver and the glucose that's backing up around all these different organs. And then this concept of autophagy getting interrupted. This is where our cellular systems are trying to recover and to get rid of the waste products and so on that are in the system. All right, this is Dr. Pete. I'm going to stop talking now and give anyone who might have a question a chance to respond. If you're on YouTube with us or Facebook, just type your question right into the chat. If you're in Clubhouse, put up your hand, come up on stage. Let's get a conversation going. Let's see what we can do here. All right, I have a question that's coming in on my on one of the other platforms outside of Clubhouse, and this question is, what happens if I do break down and have a big plate of ice cream? How serious of a matter is this? All right, so let's talk about this. Again, I introduced the idea of glucose intolerance a couple of minutes ago, and this is a fancy term for the fact that for at least half of our population, we can only tolerate X amount of sugar in our diet. And I pointed out that tolerance is different, right? My glucose, my tolerance in terms of how much sugar I can eat, glucose, fructose, whatever form it comes into me in, is going to be different than my next door neighbor, right? Everyone has a different glucose tolerance. Is this easy to nail down? No, it is not. Because it's an individual thing. How do you figure out what it is for yourself? Well, for someone like me that measures my biometrics very carefully every day, sometimes, 3 years into this, when I eat something brand new, like we've talked about, we went to a reunion this week, over the weekend. Let's see, I just brought some. Okay, he's up. All right, I'll get to you in a second, Jimmy. So we went to this reunion, and I divulged that I did try some things, right? So I tested my blood later to see if there was any effect on, how I ate these different meals there. Why did I do that? Because I'm interested in my own glucose intolerance. That's why. I'd like to have a sense for it. And I know in my case, my glucose intolerance that window is pretty small, right? Is that going to be true for everyone? No. But let's say you've been doing the ketogenic diet, and I'm going to point this out because it's really important, and you are tracking your biometrics. You actually know that you've been in ketosis. And that you're in ketosis 24 hours a day, and then you could have this big plate of ice cream. What's going to happen? You're going to get knocked out of ketosis. That's going to happen. And what people have to understand is that the importance of ketosis is knowing, right? It's not this label, ketosis. Being able to track ketosis means it's a surrogate for being able to track the majority that you are fat burning as a priority in your body versus sugar burning. And when you come out of ketosis, that means that you're not fat burning. And a lot of, and my recommendation, any coach worth their salt is going to tell you, just get back on the train as quickly as possible and get going again, right? That's the advice, right? Don't beat yourself up over it. Don't have a thing about it. Get back on the train. But what's my point here? My point is that it's not well understood how fast you actually are going to shift back into solid fat burning, because there's gene regulation that goes on here, right? Different genes that are being turned on, different genes that are being turned off that are insulin dependent. And that process can take days. And this is the thing that people don't want to hear. It can take days. So how many days is it going to take you? I don't know, because this glucose intolerance thing is an individual thing. All right, I'm Dr. Pete, and I'm done talking now. Welcome to the stage, Jimmy. What do you got for us?
Actually, piggybacking on what you were just saying, Dr. Eric Westman did a study looking at that very thing of how long does it take for you to get back into ketosis once you're kicked out. And so they had one study group that was a bunch of young people, ostensibly insulin sensitive. And then they had a second study group that was mostly women over the age of 40, in menopause or postmenopause, and obviously heavily insulin resistant at that point. And it took the healthy kids, I say kids because most of them were in their early 20s, about a week to get back into ketosis after just one meal that was high carb, like the ice cream example you were talking about. The insulin resistant group, it took them 30 days, Pete. And so, yes, it's very highly bio-individual as to how long it takes to get back in, but it's another reason why you want to avoid those sugary treats as much as possible. So thanks for having me up on stage. My question is more about, I don't think putting all the focus on sugar does a service to people. And I've seen this for many years in my own work, where people are like, well, I've cut out all the sugar and I'm still having issues in my weight and in my blood sugar and da-da-da. And then you start teasing at it and they're like, well, I'm having fruit. Oh, what fruit are you eating? Oh, I'm having bananas and peaches and apples. And you do realize that sugar, right? But still sugar. So I think people, when they hear sugar, they just think of the junk food sugar, and they don't think about direct sugar from even natural foods like those fruits, but even like foods that turn to sugar in the body, vis-a-vis grains and starches and other things. So I think a better way to maybe message this, and I'm curious what you and Tanner have to say, is stop the blood sugar response, stop the insulin response. And if we get people to focus on those things, then I think it teases it even more, and it even brings in lifestyle things like a bad night of sleep also raises your blood sugar. Exercise, which is good, but in the moment will raise your blood sugar. Stress will raise your blood sugar. All of these things are never talked about within this concept of sugar.
That's really an excellent point. And I want to stay organized in my mind about this. So because I have a couple of things that I want to piggyback on you, Jimmy, with what you're saying. The first is last week, because this is a running series. We talked about the fact that stopping the sugar is just the initial thing that has to happen. People are asking, all right, what is the number one, the simplest thing I can do before I even start learning about this lifestyle? What can I do? And you know, and that is to start recognizing, you know, the unrefined sugars. And as you pointed out last week, I talked about the acronym GPS: no GPS, no grains, potatoes, or sugar. And the reason that we started, we decided to go down this road and talk about the sugar aspect of it is something that I've struggled with in my own practice. And that's, you know, for a very long time, I've been absolutely adamant that you must learn about, you know, reducing the total carbohydrates. And So I vacillated about this. I'm really glad you're up here. So maybe we can really talk about this, because I know that there's people listening that need to hear and understand this. But I vacillated in my own practice because, you know, I've been a teacher for 28 years, a chemist, and I have conversations with whoever I can influence about this. And I think, okay, I've really educated this person. I provided them with materials, and we have written materials we give them. We have online classes, this whole thing. But there seems to be a lot of difficulty getting underneath the refined sugar thing and really understanding that they have to give up the carbs. And so in the last weeks, in the last weeks, I have sort of stepped back and gone, all right, when I look at not only my own extended family, but I'm going to come back to the reunion because, I do now that I'm so into this so deep, I'm observing all the time, and I'm seeing all these people who I think are sugar addicted, loading their plates up with, not just in the pizza example, but then all of the other things that they had out on that table, just piled high in unrefined carbohydrates. And I'm thinking, holy crap, where do we start with this, right? Where do we start with this problem? Because, coming back to the statistics, it's clear for especially people my age, 63 years old, who are going to the doctor. And I just had another extended family member about a week ago that I learned about through the grapevine. They got an email like mine. You're pre-diabetic. Your numbers look lousy. You need to do something about this. And I'm going, even when those guys find this stuff out, there's massive amounts of denial. I think just in terms of recognizing that maybe the way that they think that they're eating is actually not healthy. When you think about our culture and what's been beat into us, that you've got to have this fruit, and you've got to have, look at the food pyramid, right? Look at the literal carbohydrates on the bottom of that pyramid. And so from an educational point of view, I've really been struggling with this, because how do you get someone who's just been diagnosed with this, who's still locked into the medical establishment, that literally is telling you, just double down on the natural stuff, right? Just keep eating the way you're eating. Get rid of the sugar, but make sure to have your healthy carbohydrates, right? So that's where I'm coming from with this. And I totally back up what you're saying. People need to realize, that this goes deeper than just the most simple stuff. But where I'll finish and turn the stage back over is to remind myself, actually, that really the biggest challenge that I have seen to the sustainability of this lifestyle for the people that I work with, it literally boils down to the food addiction issues, that the cravings that they have for these sugary items, right? And the inability to give them up. I have one client in particular who can only make it 4 days, and then they're binging like there's no tomorrow. They start at 4 p.m. and they go until 10 o'clock at night with the gummies, the pizza, the potato chips and whatnot. And it's a disease. It's not, that in itself is a disease. How do we help these people, right? How do we help ourselves to do better with this and bring this down? Because the percentage of people that are my age that are moving into these conditions is massive, right? Even if we shift to the health costs of this, it's nearly, I think, $1 trillion a year. It's close to $1 trillion a year. But anyway, I'm Dr. Pete, and I'm done talking now.
And it's actually people much younger than you. I'm 49, and a lot of my peers suffer from many of these same things, and even much younger than me. Maybe not quite Tanner's age. You're still a youngin', so you're going to be healthy for a little while. But yeah, I think part of the simultaneous messaging, Pete, that needs to go along with Stop the Sugar is eat more fat. And I think this is why that addiction monster gobbles them up so easily, is we're telling them to stop the sugar, but you're not giving them anything to replace that with that would give them hormone control. Like, I think ghrelin screams at you when you cut sugar, but then you don't replace it with fat and protein. So the body is kind of left going, okay, something's missing. I don't know what's happening. I'm going to freak out a little bit. And that's when people have these binges. So this is why I think, yes, it is a simple thing to say stop the sugar, but if you don't say stop the sugar and, oh yeah, by the way, all those years you had to give up fat and not eat meat and all that, yeah, that's all over. You get to have all that you want. And also take away the onus of you have to watch your calories. Yes, they're important, but if you're trying to get off sugar and you tell people just don't eat sugar, grains, potatoes, I love the GPS, that's a really good acronym. give those things up and then have all the fat and protein you want. Yes, it sounds a little daunting. Oh my gosh, they'll eat too many calories. But all the studies that show ad libitum eating with a ketogenic approach actually show they naturally modulate their calories without really having to force them. So I think that is part of the answer in this discussion.
Absolutely. In fact, in a family circle yesterday, we talked about the fact, or I talked about the fact that when you drop the sugars down, you need to bring the fat and the protein up. And what happens in these discussions all the time is somebody's going to say, well, you can't eat all that fat. You're going to die, from all that fat. And then part of that discussion it becomes an educational thing again, because I had to point out yesterday that when you dig the plaque out of somebody who's had a heart attack, the saturated fat in there is actually not the saturated fat that they ate. It's saturated. It's a unique set of saturated fats that got produced because of the high carbohydrate, triglyceride effect. So there's so much to what you're saying. I'm really excited that you're up here, Jimmy. Is there anyone else in the room that wants to get up here and get their hands dirty with this? Because this is fortunate. We're getting right down into the nitty gritty of this whole deal.
I will add, while somebody's waiting to raise their hand, that Dr. Jeff Volek did a lot of these same studies looking at saturated fat production in the blood was much higher when you ate a high carb diet, and when you ate more saturated fat in your diet, you actually lowered the saturated fat in the blood, which is counterintuitive because they say cut your saturated fat so you don't, quote, clog your arteries, which has always been a misnomer. It's never done that. And yet it still pervades in common culture. Most people believe that. But the studies have shown just the opposite, like you were just saying. The saturated fat that is created endogenously from carbohydrate consumption, far worse, far greater than if you ate saturated fat. It's not doing anything. It's benign in your body when you consume saturated fat.
Hi, Jimmy. Hi, guys. I'm Dr. Kamapali.
Hey, Rabbi.
How are you, Jimmy? Thank you for...
Morning.
Morning. Basically, I've been an infectious disease and wound care doctor, board certified in both since 2003. But it took a lot of trouble for me personally going through to become what I am and losing 50 pounds. And essentially it took a journey since 2015. I've been going through this, and it is troublesome for providers like me because we are taught different things. And I'm so happy that there are people like Jimmy out there trying to teach doctors to do the right thing and never giving up on people like us who really are wanting to do the right thing. But the message we get and the teachings that we are taught, like all these saturated fats, statins, and all those things, we are given a different route. Now, stepping back, I just wanted to comment on the addiction path and the oils. So I think we did not discuss oils here, but I think that the vegetable oils might be something that you might want to bring up and discuss. I think they happen to cause most of the problem, along with carbs, mostly refined carbs, then other carbs too. And but also there's multifactorial problems, and I am trying to deliver this solution to my patients. I mean, like, I don't get paid much to do it, and a lot of problems because I have to meet an overhead. But I sit there and talk to my patients, and so it's so hard to deliver a solution. And even using telemedicine technology, I do that. And how troublesome it is for doctors is also another perspective. And addiction is a huge thing because people find one reason or another. And if anybody is understanding about addiction processes and why we rationalize things, how we justify things. Say, for example, this morning I woke up and I was just taking the heavy cream to put it into the coffee, black coffee that I do, a little bit heavy cream. And I found that there was ice cream cones in the refrigerator. I asked my wife, hey, why did you even bring them in? She said, oh, there was a coupon. Kids are coming over. Now my eyes are going towards that ice cream cones. I mean, like, I cannot take one bite of that freaking cone because I would not stop. So I just have to run away from it, and I just have to stay away from it so far away. I mean, like, the addict in me is so bad. So, so how do I fight it? Even knowing what I do, even doing what I do, how do I go around doing it? So those are the things that addicts that we are all have to face. I'm out.
I really appreciate your words because, again, I think that the biggest challenge those of us that are trying to help others about this in terms of sustainability is dealing with the food addiction issue. And as Jimmy pointed out, even if you're teaching your people about the fact that they have to raise the fat and the protein, underlying that can be really serious addiction issues. And you're absolutely right. If that stuff is in the house, people tend to eat it. And you also touched on something else, and that's as a teacher, 28-year veteran teacher, how we reward our children matters, right? And I've seen in at least here in the U.S., the way teachers handle middle class, especially middle class or even high school classes, with reward systems where they're throwing candy out into the crowd for answers is something that is really an issue. Yeah, the vegetable oils, that is a very important component of this. And perhaps it's because of my teaching background that what I'm trying to do in these sessions is to keep things, fairly focused and try and do one major thing at a time, rather than allowing the discussion to go to all of the facets. Because I'm worried if there's somebody in the audience that they can be overwhelmed by all of the serious concept issues that are here. But the vegetable oil thing is really, really a serious issue here too. So anyone going on the ketogenic diet, the issue is really getting the carbs down. I advocate serious biomarker monitoring at the minimum: blood glucose, ketones, blood pressure, and weight every single day. And being able to consistently stay in ketosis, right? And the knowledge base behind that is understanding the three main categories of macronutrients that either need to change or be reduced. So we're talking about getting the glucose input down. We're talking about getting the fructose down, right? The sugars, the complex carbohydrates, the whole 9 yards. And then there's the issue of vegetable oils, switching and eating the natural fats, like ghee, beef tallow, bacon grease, avocado oil, and olive oil. But in any case, we actually have gone well over an hour, and I want to be respectful of everyone's time. So we are going to close the room soon. If you have a question, please raise your hand and come on up. We can do a couple more questions, and then Tanner and I also we also need to go because we have action-packed days ahead of us here. Does anyone have anything they want to add or come up? Anything you want to ask or add? We've had some great additions this morning. Jimmy and Ravi we're here. Anyone else want to jump in? Something to say?
I have just a quick thing too, kind of piggybacking off of one thing that Jimmy said. I don't think he's in our room any longer, but if you are, I am 26 years old, and yes, I agree that there's a lot of individuals my age that are not considered pre-diabetic yet or type 2 diabetic yet. And the reason being is, I come from, just like my dad, he's a CrossFit athlete. I come from an extraordinarily athletic family. and growing up, my dad was a cook in the family. We always had homemade meals. What did those homemade meals come with? Potatoes. We're very Midwestern, so pasta, potatoes, like the normal meat and potatoes aspect that we have. And, when he went to the doctor 2.5 years ago, he was considered pre-diabetic. So although the younger generation, yes, we don't have as much as, we don't go to the doctor and they really tell us, oh, you're pre-diabetic, yeah, you're type 2 diabetic. 20% as of, Dad, and correct me if I'm wrong, but about 20% of my generation is predisposition for diabetes or pre-diabetes, and we don't even know it. So although if you are younger and you're considering like the low carb lifestyle, do your research on it, because for me, I'm doing this to make sure that when I'm older, I am not considered pre-diabetic or type 2 diabetic, and that I'm able to, not have to go down that road. So I'm trying to make sure that it's more preventative. So yes, although I would say that I am younger, and the younger generation has a tendency to be, I'm going to put quotation marks around this, healthier based off of what people say. I don't necessarily think that I think that my generation, actually, we eat a lot of crap. I think back to college, what I ate in college, and it's not anything I eat now. So I think regardless of what age you are, you have to be extraordinarily careful as to what you're putting in your body.
So this is the last chance. Does anyone have anything they want to add, or any questions that they want to ask? All right, so I want to let everyone know again that this club is Keto Makes Me Healthy. If you like what we're doing, please click on the little green house. Remember, too, there are some outstanding clubs on Clubhouse, and especially in the area of keto support. Any of the addiction stuff that we're talking about, the food cravings, there's a lot of rooms here that get opened about bringing us all up together and being able to say no to that stuff. That would be the Keto Diet, Keto University, and Keto for the Soul. These are great clubs. You should check them out. And, Clubhouse is growing fast. So there are clubs that I can't think of to mention right now. So I would encourage you to look around, keep your eyeballs peeled so that you can find support where you need it. Our YouTube channel, where we produce educational videos like this morning, recipe videos, and also a good deal on gout suffering and the ketogenic diet. I'm a gout sufferer and I do keto, so I have a lot to say about the ability to do a ketogenic diet as somebody who has high uric acid. And that YouTube channel is Dr. Pete's Keto Club with a K. And then you also can visit us at makesme-healthy.com. And also you can hit us on Instagram. So with that, I would like to thank everyone for being here. If there's a question that you didn't feel comfortable coming up on stage for, you can reach us at ketonicrevolution at gmail.com or hit us through Instagram, and we'd be glad to help you out, answer your question, or whatever. Just hit us up. All right. And with that, we're going to go ahead and close the room.